quick before we get started.
Yes.
There's no one that has logged.
Good afternoon. We will go ahead and call to order at 3:01 p.m. the regular meeting of the Cobb County Board of Elections and Registration. And with that, all of those that are willing and able, if you will rise with me for our Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. I note, obviously, during the course of the day, there are a couple of versions. Thank you, Ms. Brooks, for the updates and getting those circulated to board members. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the agenda? And I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All of those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have public comment. I know that there are 3 individuals that have signed up to participate virtually. They are not yet on the line, so we'll start with those that are here in the room with us. I believe it's Pax Riddle. Good afternoon, Mr. Riddle. How are you? Good. Good. Each speaker will be provided with 5 minutes, and you may go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I just wanted to do 2 things. One, I wanted to thank the board and our great staff for all of your hard work over this past period of time, especially dealing with all the legal issues and so forth and still getting the job done. So kudos to everybody. Appreciate it. The other second point I wanted to bring about is just a sort of FYI to the board. I had received 3 different contacts. I think it was 2 emails and 1 text from 3 different supervisors recruiting for poll workers. And I don't know why 3 different supervisors all contacted me. That might be something you want to look into in terms of efficiency. But in all 3 cases, I responded that possibly I would be interested could you tell me what shifts or what shift work is available? And I got crickets. Nobody responded whatsoever. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Maybe there's a more efficient way to handle the contact database of possible workers. And then why would there not be a response back from those supervisors? Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riddle, and also thank you for your willingness to serve as a poll worker. I know the team will look forward to working with you. Next up is Mr. Barth.
Donald Barth,
Yes, Mr. Donald.
Marietta, Georgia. I'm here to address y'all one more time. My issue with you is this board has deliberately interfered with the elections in Cobb County during this cycle. You can go home, you can kid yourself, you can tell your kids, tell your wife, tell your husband that you didn't. The truth will speak, you did. The map that was approved by the state, approved and signed by the governor, should have been the only map that you could have and should have considered. But somehow a board that swore to serve this county decided to go out on their own and serve a select few. You didn't serve a county. Not once did you serve a county. You serve the select few. If you were a real board, you'd be looking into how the man is going to run. And he's put himself out there, Eric Allen. Did he help make the map that puts him in contention to run? Does he have anything to do with that map? Don't you think that should be something the board would care about? Something I think you should have cared about, because ethics. Where are your ethics? I got to see a couple of you downtown. Woo-wee. I wish the rest of them could have seen that. Man, it was worth every dime of parking down there. Again, you wouldn't have been upset. Nobody would have said anything if there wasn't something to hide. Now, we can play, we can talk, we can go outside and look up at the sun. You're going to be more blinded in here today than you would going out there and looking up at an eclipse. You're blinded to the truth. I can argue all day long. I can stand here. I've been asking what district I'm in since 2023 in January. Nobody knows. Sooner or later, a court will come up. It was stated downtown that all that had to be done was somebody had to remove the appeal, and we would automatically go back to square one. Who is it that put that appeal in? And why are y'all using that appeal? Why, indeed, are y'all using an appeal that has not been signed off by the governor, hasn't been approved by the state? I want you to look at yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barth. Ms. Pam Reardon.
Good afternoon. Pamela Reardon, and I'm not going to belabor what Mr. Barth just went on. I'm going to bring up 3 points. The first point is I really feel strongly that given the, 17 days, 18 days now that we have in early voting, and that you, when you became the majority on the board, extended the hours, because it used to be, let me think, 8:30 or 9 o'clock until 5 during the week, which the poll workers really liked. And now they also have to work on Mother's Day. And I just think that it's inconsiderate. I think it is throwing away too much money, given the amount of people that come and actually vote. And I remember that when Herschel was running and we had that shortened time period, we only had really a week for the runoff, the voting. We had the same amount of people vote during that 1 week that we had in the 3 weeks previous to that. So I think we should really consider that. I know the state has the law, but you could reduce the number of hours. Number 2, I came before you months ago, I should probably figure out when, but I alerted you to the fact there was going to be a problem with the U.S. Post Office. I have questions, I sent them to you, and I was trying to get questions answered locally. I was trying to get them from the post office. I was trying to get them through Congress, and now look at where we are. They have mail theft, but they even have a worse problem with getting the mail to the people. So I do not want you to turn around and say, no, we need to change the mail-in voting, because that isn't the answer. Just get your butts to the polls and vote online. Third thing, citizens, non-citizens voting. I am really concerned about non-citizens voting, and especially, not maybe so much in our state, but other states, but I have inquired on this. I tried to get some legislation this past time passed, and to no avail, because our supervisor cannot ask somebody for the proof of their citizenship, which I think is wrong in America today. Not only that we have open borders, but we are not protecting the citizens. I am a citizen who I used to be in Canada, but I got my citizenship the correct way, and I do not want non-citizens voting. So let's be cognizant of that fact that that might happen, and let's be vigilant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Reardon. Ms. Sally Riddle?
Good afternoon, Sally Riddle, Cobb County resident. Here today to bring to attention an issue that just reached me, was passed along to me, regarding some aspects around applications for absentee voters. So apparently Kim Bassinger, and I believe she's talked to you, Tate Fall as well, is an employee at one of our senior living facilities in the county. And some of their residents in the last election had checked a little box on their absentee ballot application in order to be able to receive their absentee ballots in the rest of the elections in this election cycle. Then, because of delay that they felt as far as getting the absentee ballot, the actual ballot, they went and voted in person. And then they discovered that because they voted in person here in Cobb County, that little box was now negated, and that they wouldn't automatically receive absentee ballots for the rest of the elections in the cycle, that they needed to reapply, which was causing a lot of confusion among these senior citizens. I've checked the little box a number of elections here in Cobb County and didn't realize that if I somehow went and voted in person, which a number of our people end up doing, turning in their ballot if they'd already received it, signing the affidavit, et cetera, that would negate getting the absentee ballots in the future. Now, Ms. Bassinger, who brought this to me, basically did her homework. She contacted a couple of other Atlanta metro counties. They don't negate, apparently, the little checked box, even if a person has already voted in one election in person for some reason. And she even checked with the Secretary of State's office that told her it was up to each individual county. So I guess I'm asking our county to really look at this issue so that we don't have confusion where seniors think they're going to get their absentee ballot for the next election, and then they don't because they ended up voting in an election in person. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Riddle. My understanding is the three individuals that signed up for public comment virtually are now on. Ms. Rosman, Christine Rosman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
You are, I apologize for interrupting you. You are a bit muffled, at least for me you were. So if you will speak up.
Is it okay now?
That is better, yes.
Is it okay now?
Yes, that's
Okay.
better.
Sorry, I had my laptop and my phone going. Thank you. And I am a little concerned about, well, actually I'm a lot concerned. This home rule issue has gotten so out of hand, and I thought that there was some like-mindedness at the Board of Elections that you were going to. I made an assumption that not only the Board of Elections but the Board of Commissioners would follow the rule of law with the legislators when they first did, first made the legislative lines, then you did home rule, not you personally. And then when Judge Harris made her ruling saying it was unconstitutional, and I'm just kind of actually very concerned because there's a lot of credibility that is lost, especially when it comes to our elections, especially in Georgia when there's so many questionable things happening with our Secretary of State and so many other counties too having issues. And the thing is that, and I understand you all are appointed public servants, trying to help out with the county. But you also took an oath to do what's right for the voters, for the citizens of Cobb County. And I feel that is not the priority. And I have asked you all, I've asked the Board of Commissioners, how do we keep you all accountable? Because if it were up to me, I would have followed the rule of law. I mean, that's how it works. You follow the rule of law. And it seems to be marginalized. It's having a huge impact on Cobb County. It's having an impact for the voters. I've talked to people, no clue who their commissioner is. It's hard to figure out what the lines are. They don't even know. And that's marginalizing us. It's marginalizing our ability to stay engaged with our county that we chose to live in. And there's a lot of confusion, and it unfortunately reminds me of rules for radicals, cause a lot of confusion. And that is really what it kind of feels like. And it also is almost surreal that there are candidates that want to run for office, Donald Barr, Pam Reardon, Alicia Adams. They're not even sure which map are you going to use, because in a couple of weeks, I guess it could be ruled that you can use a different map. I don't know about you, but if I were running for office, I'm not sure if I'd throw $20,000 or however much it costs to start running a campaign and really running it. I mean, that's ridiculous. And you guys have some responsibility in there. I don't know how to hold you accountable. I've asked. We don't know. It's like it's kind of up in the air. And I just wanted to say also is that what Pam Reardon said, I concur. I've spoken to a couple of sheriffs within Georgia. One of them said it's probably close to 500,000 illegal aliens are in Georgia right now, and possibly even up to 1 million. There's a reason why we have all these illegal aliens, and it is to, especially when we can't afford them, especially when we have, veterans that are homeless, and then we're paying all this money to have these illegal aliens come over. There's some connection there with voting and illegal aliens. Not sure exactly what it is, but it's very concerning. And as far as I've said it before, I've worked as a poll watcher. I've worked the polls. They are freaking dead, and they're definitely dead on the weekends. And to marginalize mothers that they want to see their family, they want to see their kids, the kids. To have voting starting on Mother's Day is, I'm not sure who made that decision, but that was really a bad one. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rossman. And I do note that at the beginning of the public comment, I don't believe those individuals that are participating virtually were on. Just to let you know, you will each have 5 minutes. So Mr. Parks, Boyd Parks.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Awesome. I need to ask you to make some changes to the minutes for both March 12th. We'll start with that one. On the second page, the second bullet item says at North Cobb, last day of AIP, and then it says observer from GOP. Actually, that should read official poll watcher, as it read on my badge that I was given. And then on the next line, it says how 2020 election was stolen. Well, those words never came out of my mouth and should not be in the minutes. It should actually read, quote, finding evidence of election fraud through analyzing 2020/2022 election data from the Secretary of State. The only data used is from the Census Bureau and the Secretary of State. I'm filling in the blanks here. Fraud is documented by the number of votes cast that exceed the number of registrations. The only way that can happen. Then on the minutes for the 15th, special called board meeting, I'm sorry, I got the wrong page. The meeting on the 18th. On the first page, under my name, Boyd Parks, in person. I'm curious if the post office has had any comeback with us that you may recall, and it says here that it took the post office 9 days to get my absentee ballot to me. And I'm curious also if any investigation's been done on the 3 extra scans where the scanner had 3 more clicks on it than the sum of all the ballot marking devices did. Those are my issues for today. Thank you all.
Thank you. And I will note, however, it's not generally the practice of this board to respond to public comment. And so during the course of the meeting, during Director Fall's update, I do believe it's appropriate in this particular instance, as I believe each of the items, or at least one of the items, was a part of the update that you provided to us during the election night meeting to address that then. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. And then finally, a Patrick McGann, please. Are you with us, Mr. McGann? Do you see him on, CP? Is there a third person on?
Let me double check.
Okay. McGann, McGann, Patrick?
Okay, should be on now.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead. Mr. Patrick McGann?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, my concern, I have a bunch of concerns about the stolen 2020 election. Hopefully we can address the issues that happened and allowed that to happen. There was a court case in Georgia in January where Professor Haldeman, who's been working on this, proving that the machines are hackable, easily hackable. He's been doing that since 2016, as he was a Hillary Clinton supporter and he thought that Donald Trump had stolen the election. He proved in a courtroom here in Georgia in January by hacking a Dominion voting machine with a ballpoint pen that he used from the defense attorney. The judge has not rendered her decision in that case. This is just kick the can down the road to allow another stolen election in Georgia. I think a lot of people, thousands of people in Georgia, have no faith in the elections here. We see irregularities nonstop in every election. I think in the 2022 election, there were irregularities. But the 2020 election was flat out stolen. The influx of illegal immigrants into the state is for a couple reasons. It's mainly to affect the census, as that you cannot have more counterfeit ballots than you have people registered in your census of voting age. That's the primary reason to get them here. There are other reasons to have them here, but step one for this state and for the next election is to steal the 2024 election. I would like to hear more discussion about what we are going to do about these easily hackable machines that are all over the country and all over the world, frankly, allowing dictatorships really to take hold permanently. I'd like to hear from Cobb County of what our plan is to get rid of these machines. Thank you. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. McCann, for your comments. This concludes the public comment portion on our agenda. Next up is the approval of the meeting minutes. Actually, I think it would be appropriate to, at a minimum, make reference to the comments that Mr. Parks made. So my understanding, the meeting minutes for the March 12th meeting, that was the update. What he was referring to on the second page, the update as you provided it to us, your comments reflected what was shared with you by the person that reached out to you from that North Cobb polling location, correct?
Correct. It was two different workers that had submitted a complaint as well as the flyer that was being distributed.
Okay.
He was an official poll watcher. I apologize, I'm still learning the different words. It's very different from Virginia.
Okay.
As to what he was in that capacity. However, in regards to about how the 2020 election was stolen, the flyer does say of election fraud through analyzing 2020-2022 election data. So I do think that is an accurate depiction of what the complaints were regarding.
Right, and the minutes are not being provided for the truth of the matter. The minutes, as they are being provided, are reflective of what was communicated to you. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and take up the approval of the March 12th meeting minutes. And I would propose that the reference to Mr. Parks as an observer be corrected such that it is correctly reflected that he is an official poll watcher from the GOP. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add one substantive thing. Can we start to add page numbers to the minutes, like 1 of 2, 2 of 2? I know that sounds kind of...
That's fine.
But I feel like that would be helpful when we're looking at 3 or 4 of these in a row, if we just have page numbers.
Certainly, certainly.
And it would help if everybody, for them to reference what page as well.
Sure. Okay. With respect to the approval of the meeting minutes, is there a motion to approve the minutes with that amendment noted? Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the meeting minutes for our March 12th election night meeting. All those in favor? Any opposed?
I have a comment. The motion should be approved as amended correctly.
I'm fairly,
You said approved. I think.
as amended. Well, actually, I did. I said, is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes with the amendment noted? I believe that's what I said. Is that what I
Did
said,
you?
Mr. White?
Okay, all right, I missed that part.
No worries.
That's what we voted on in second and third.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, my brain is slow.
it's Monday.
It's about 3 minutes behind real time.
No worries. So it's been, the motion passes unanimously. Going on to the next meeting minutes, that being the March 15th meeting. That was our special called board meeting. We'll entertain well, first, has everyone had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes, and are there any suggested proposed revisions? Nope. If there are none, or hearing that there are none, we will entertain a motion to approve these meeting minutes as provided.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you both. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Then with regard to the March 18th meeting minutes, I note that Mr. Parks did raise a question for us. It wasn't with respect to the substance of the meeting minutes. He just has questions with regard to the concerns raised around USPS. My understanding, Ms. Fall, is that that's already a part of your director update. So with that, I don't believe that there is a need to make any proposed revisions based upon Mr. Parks' comments. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes? Any proposed revisions? Nope. I'll entertain a motion to accept these to approve these meeting minutes as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the meeting minutes for our March 18th certification meeting as presented. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business, that being the AIP voting schedule for the June 18th general primary nonpartisan runoff. Each of us should have a copy of it before us. Ms. Fall, you'll be presenting on this?
Yes.
Okay.
And CP will get that pulled up for everyone as well. So we are proposing these sites for our June runoff in the event that we have one, which we probably will. So wanted to go ahead and get the ball rolling so we could start scheduling as well. So you'll note that these locations were chosen because they are our Dropbox locations. So it made sense for us to utilize those. That way we could utilize the Dropboxes while the sites are open. And we are proposing June 10th through the 14th, that Monday to Friday, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Go ahead, Mr. Bruning.
I had a question. How many drop boxes are we allowed?
So it's the 1 per 500,000. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? 6, including our office. So our office will have one, and then we can have up to 5 more additional. So we are at our max, but they have to be at early voting locations, only open when the early voting site is open.
Right, okay.
I do have a question about the Smyrna Community Center. I know that in the previous election, there were some concerns about the community center because it is being used as an AIP location. Do we know as to whether it will be available on Election Day?
It won't be available for Election Day through the end of the year. So we'll continue to use it as an AIP site because we use a different portion of the facility.
Right.
But the portion we use for Election Day is under construction. So that's why we're not able to use it for the remainder of the year.
Okay, and so I thought that was the case, but just wanting to be certain that we're all clear on that. And then obviously the concerns that were raised around the signage, because again, if someone goes there and people see, if I'm assigned to that location, I see people voting there for AIP, but I can't go there to vote on Election Day. Just want to be certain that we're making sure that there's appropriate signage that's easily readable and accessible such that that confusion, we can at least attempt to alleviate that confusion.
Absolutely, and we appreciated that feedback on the signage that we are legally required to post, the 4x4 sign and the 20x30 signs. They have to be up 7 days in advance, which is during AIP, so I definitely understand the confusion there. So we will continue to ensure that those signs explicitly say on Election Day with the respective election date. Bless you.
Bless you.
So for the May election, we'll make sure to have that banner across the top that we added during AIP of this last election.
Okay. I think you had a question, Ms. Fisher.
I do. We're heavy on locations in what I would deem to be Commission District 4. So we have Mableton, Powder Springs, and Smyrna. Is there any way we can add a location in northeast Cobb?
So
And just
Tim D.
added-
Lee is their site for Northeast? Like add that one in?
Yeah.
Isn't that Tim Lee?
Tim Lee, Senior Center.
Tim Lee, we have East Cobb. I was thinking more towards the Kennesaw area.
But Tim Lee is one of our biggest turnout
It
early
is.
voting
It
locations.
is.
So
It is.
I was going to say that as well, because we only actually have one early vote location on that side of 75. In 2022, we actually had 8 early vote. We're down to 6 on this one.
Right.
Plus, we're not including the Saturday.
Right.
So I'm going to say I'd like to see the Saturday and see something added to I do think only having one location on the east.
Tim Lee would be convenient for Kennesaw as well, straight shot down Sandy Plains, but right now we're very heavy in one geographical area, in my opinion. So.
And I'm sorry, you're saying South Cobb, Community Center, Ron Anderson Rec Center, and the Smyrna Community Center, those being the three that you believe to be in District 4?
Well, without looking at a district
well, just the
format.
ones that you referenced.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I know
think
Smyrna's
it
in District 2.
leans towards the left side of the map, and no pun intended, between left and right. But it does tend to lean towards the left side of the map, not the right.
Okay.
The only thing.
We don't, I apologize for interrupting. We don't have a map.
I have one, yeah.
Okay, got it. I see, thank you. Just to the point we're talking about it, if we could have that visual.
I don't see a map in the last, do you?
No, it's at the end of the meeting minutes, or the,
Okay.
So I know it's hard to see on the camera, I apologize, it's black and white, but it's the circles with the numbers in them, and then there's stars above them as well. So you can see it's 1 through 6 is listed there. And again, those were chosen because they were Dropbox locations.
right. So are you, so Tim Lee Center would be to the right of 575, such that it would be in the upper right quadrant?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you look at where East Piedmont,
Right.
it's
gonna be
hard-
somewhere
It's
over
hard
there.
to tell where this is on this map, but.
Right, but it's gonna be somewhere around where it says Ebenezer Road, East Piedmont,
Yes,
Canton.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
so it's gonna be north of
Where
3.
where it actually is at the intersection of Sandy Plains and Shallowford Road, but
Understood.
those are, I don't see,
Shallowford Road is the top border. So if you looked at the very top, that's noted as Shallowford Road. So it's going to be further north than what I was describing.
I think it's, I think.
actually, no, Tim Lee is, if you look at where Johnson Ferry kind of dead ends and go to your left,
Right, that's what I was saying. It's somewhere in the
that's
Ebenezer.
Shallowford, that is Shallowford Road.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would be thereabouts.
I think it's, I believe it's a good suggestion. So do we have the ability to add that?
Absolutely. It's just a proposal, so.
Of course.
Whatever you guys want to add or take away or anything like that.
I just think to balance out the geography, I'm with Stephen because Tim Lee's always in the top 3 turnout.
Makes sense.
Right.
Do we have any concern about kind of this large area between 6 and 2? I mean, previously, obviously, our folks, thank you so much for that, CP. Previously, our office was on Whitlock, and that would have taken care of that, but that's no longer the case.
Right, so on that, I'm looking at our other list. Our west location that we utilize, that we'll be utilizing in May, is West Cobb Senior Center. I believe that's in the middle there. I'm still learning my Cobb geography, so I apologize. But that is our designated west location for the May election.
Okay.
Hey, do we know do you have the count of how many were at Ron Anderson versus Tim Lee?
For the PPP? Yes, so, let's see. For the PPP, we had just over 4,300 voters at Tim Lee, And then at Ron Anderson, we had just over 1,600.
Big difference. And, you know, the precincts that typically fall within between 2 and 6, those are usually pretty low turnout.
Okay, and that's why I raised, if we don't have a
Is
concern.
it Collier Park, I think, is one of them, and those,
Southwest.
and which is the other one?
We have Collar Park, and then Ben Robertson is our Kennesaw
Yeah,
location.
those usually have pretty low.
And West
turnout.
Cobb Regional is our northwest.
The library.
Yeah.
But low turnout doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't provide opportunity. So that's, you know, we've been, as this board, we've often looked at consistency as part of our motto, and what we've been looking to do is provide consistent opportunity for our voters and equally throughout the county. So I do think those are two areas that we are sort of barren in coverage for this.
Do we have any numbers for West Cobb Regional Library, or I think you'd already given Ben Rob?
Sure, so West Cobb Regional Library for the PPP was just over 2,000 voters.
Okay, and anything for the primary runoff in June of 2022?
For which location?
West Cobb Regional Library.
We were at, let me look, I don't believe we were there. I have it
Okay.
listed.
I think we were, just based upon what was provided, the AIP voting options flyer from the June 21st, 2022 runoff.
So we at West Cobb Regional Library, we had 214 Democratic, 5 Republican, 115 nonpartisan in that runoff.
Okay. Because I think a runoff may be more indicative than of
The
what the
PPP.
turnout would be, but it's good to have the information from the PPP. Okay.
But I really think the key is that Tim Lee is always kind of the champion in terms of turnout, and
Your mic. Yeah, and I don't think it's a matter of a question about Tim Lee. I think without us having obviously taken a vote, we're not going to take a vote today. I think we had shifted from the conversation about Tim Lee to the portion between 6 and 2 that seemed to present a polling place desert. So I think we were all in agreement with respect to Tim Lee in the upper right-hand corner of the county. But it was, the question was being raised about the western portion of the county and the absence of us obviously being able to be at Whitlock at this point. This expansive area between 6 and 2, where we presently have, or are proposing to have, a AIP locations. Is there a need to have something between those two? And it sounded like, at least for the PPP, there was a fairly decent turnout, but not so much
Yeah.
for the June 2022.
And I would say out of those 3, West, which is Ward Cobb Senior Center, and then Northwest, West Cobb Regional Library in Kennesaw. The West, the Ward Cobb Senior Center was our largest turnout for the PPP. When I'm looking at this, they were just over 3,200 versus Northwest's 2,000 versus Kennesaw's 1,800. Again, not quite indicative of a June runoff, but this is at least what we've seen this year.
Okay, and I'm sorry, what was the location that had the highest turnout?
West, that's that Ward Cobb Senior Center.
West Cobb Senior Center.
Was higher than Tim Lee and,
No, I'm just talking about
We've
West.
taken Tim Lee out of the
Yep.
conversation. Well, not out of the conversation, but because we're just talking about this western portion.
Correct.
At least I believe, that's all we're talking about, is this western portion right
Between
now.
those 3.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Like I said, still learning.
And
about
that's
Cobb
right in the
geography.
middle.
Yep. Okay. So it sounds like perhaps the West Cobb Senior Center, I know we're not obviously voting on this. I'm glad we are having the opportunity to have this conversation before we vote next month. Potentially adding West Cobb Senior Center to give coverage for the western portion of the county, and then the northeastern portion of the county with Tim Lee.
Definitely. I can add those 2 to the proposal. For
wouldn't
vote.
we need to go ahead and vote on it in this meeting because of the LNA for this? What is the date?
The LNA won't be until we get the equipment back, so it'd be after
This
the
is
May
for
election.
June runoff.
Uh-huh.
Right.
The LNA,
But we have no early voting. Yes,
This is the early voting.
this
So
is the early voting.
we would
June
vote on
10th,
this at
June 10th.
the election day
18th.
meeting or the certification, either one.
June 10th, it starts early voting.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, it's the June 18th election, but yes, start of early voting is June 10th. But I don't believe we need to vote on this today.
No, we don't need to. We have time.
We have
At
time.
either preferably the election day meeting, because as we'll be getting that equipment back, we'll start to flip it for AIP.
Okay. Does anyone have anything further with regard to the proposed AIP for the June runoff? If obviously a runoff is needed and adding these potential 2 additional locations?
I don't know how everybody else feels, but I think we should look at starting on that Saturday if it's feasible. I just think we should have one weekend opportunity for voters.
Didn't we have problems with being ready by Saturday?
That's what I'm asking. I mean, we did offer it, we did start on that Saturday in 2022.
We started on a Sunday.
No.
We
We started-
actually
it looks
on
like-
June 8th.
Yes, Wednesday.
Well, Wednesday
Right, we
at the
did
main
start,
office.
right, we started but we did have Saturday, we did not have Sunday voting, we had Saturday voting in that runoff.
Do you have data around Saturday?
The data we have from 2022 isn't broken down by day.
By day.
I can go back and do a deeper dig to see if we can pull that.
If
Because we didn't
possible.
do the 3-week report we do now, so.
Right.
I'm sure the data is somewhere, it just wasn't readily available today.
Okay. I mean,
Didn't
to the
Carly,
extent-
didn't she email that?
I don't know that it was.
It's not broken down by
It's
day.
not by day.
It wasn't broken down by day, just by location.
Overall, it was, not individual locations.
Oh, by each location?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I see. There's just not totals at the end. But yeah, it is broken down by each day by location.
Okay.
Not in a total column. So I can
Right.
total that up and get that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you could get that, especially in light of the fact that we're not voting on this today, just so that I can make an informed decision. I won't speak for my colleagues. They may not need the data, but I would like to see the data and
For
around
that-
Saturday.
For that election on Saturday, June 11th, there were 489 advance in-person votes out of 8,500 total for the election cycle. So
Okay.
there was, almost 500
I'm sorry,
voters.
what was it? 400 and what?
489 was the total for that day, for Saturday, June 11th.
Mm-hmm.
And the grand total over the whole time period was 8,500 total voters.
Okay. So it's less than 10%. Okay. Yep. And I do note that Ms. Mosbacher is correct in that we attempt to be consistent in the offerings that allows some manage expectations of our voters, so. Ms. Fisher?
Yes, I think data that would be most beneficial before we vote on this is the number of contested races that we have a possibility for a runoff. Because as I'm thinking through this, East Cobb area, Timley and Lower Roswell Road, I cannot think of any contested races for the Republicans. There may be 1 or 2 for the Democrats, but that might be something we need to look at before we go to the expense of adding. Just saying.
Okay.
Is that-
And maybe that should just be part of this. I know we've tried to get to a point where we have a standard set of data points that we request of the team when we're considering this. So obviously, the proposed locations, what voter turnout was in maybe the most recent election, in this instance, the PPP, the most recent comparable election in that instance, I think it would be this June 2022. But perhaps that should also be an additional factor. Looking at the races that are there from a contested point. So then you and the team will know, okay, whenever we're talking AIP, provide this, complete data set.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We'll also.
Your microphone.
We'll also know what the turnout is for the primary AIP. By the time we discuss this, all those numbers will be
Okay.
at our hands.
Yep.
So that's,
Additional information?
Yep.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else as far as requests for the team or any other comments related to the proposed advanced in-person voting locations for a June runoff? Okay. If there's nothing else, I believe the next item on the agenda is old business. Is there any old business? Ms. Fisher?
There is a little old business that I think we discussed in one of our previous mini board meetings. I don't know if you want to do that discussion during Tate's update or
Depending upon the
now.
topic, it very well may be as a part of
Well,
Ms.
a lot of topics surrounding Jarvis. I think in one of the meetings, I made the recommendation on the RIF tickets.
Ms.
no.
Fall, I think that's a part of your update.
That's why I'm asking you, do we want to do it?
I think we could do it as part of her update,
Okay.
if that's
Happy to do
fine.
that.
And then obviously, if it's not addressed, you have board member comment, and we can raise it then. But I would imagine any questions that you have, I know, again, based upon the email correspondence and preparing the agenda, questions were raised, and I believe Director Fall is proposing to provide an update relating to the RIF, the REIF tickets request with Jarvis and other issues. Is that
Okay.
correct,
Yes,
Ms. Fall?
yes.
Okay.
And none of those issues require a vote, correct?
I don't believe so, but we're not precluded from taking a vote
Okay.
if they do.
All right. So is that proper under her update?
We can, I'm sorry, we're not precluded from taking a vote during an update, correct, Mr. White?
Well, you wouldn't take a vote during the update. What you'd do is after the update.
After the
If there's
update.
action needed, then you would ask for a motion to add something.
Put it
to
this way, this is not
Yeah.
the last
Right.
opportunity
No,
to take a vote.
You could
I should
suspend,
ask my
you could
question
suspend the
differently.
rules, amend the agenda, and add an action item if you need
Okay,
to.
yeah. I can't tell whether we would need action taken at this point because I haven't heard her update. Okay. It's
Okay.
on you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks all for being here today. I have some good bit of information to go through, and I think we'll have a lot of questions and discussion, so I'm looking forward to that. First, I'm looking forward to the upcoming May election. In regards to training, we started AIP training this past Saturday. Board members, I gave you a training schedule in your packets. That way you have that. So AIP training started this past Saturday with our managers training and our poll pad trainings. And then our election day training will start this Wednesday. So very quickly jumping right back into it. We'll see all of our poll workers shining faces again and get them through training for this election. And then also in the packet I gave CP as well as board members is our notice on our LNA testing. So I think it's the last one. This is the legal notice that was posted in the MDJ for our LNA testing, which starts tomorrow. So I encourage anyone who has questions about our equipment to come to our logic and accuracy testing to see what we do to ensure that our equipment is secure and that it's sealed and that we're testing it to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. So we'll start LNA tomorrow at 9 a.m. and that address 30 Key Drive, that's our new, it used to be called the Cabinet Shop. It was from properties right across the street from our office on that side street, not off of Roswell. We acquired that as an additional warehouse, so it's now ready to go. So we're going to test all of our AIP equipment over there. That way it stays separate from the election day equipment. So we'll do all of the AIP testing there without having to utilize that AIP room, which is where we normally test the AIP equipment. That way they can conduct training in that room. So we'll be testing the AIP equipment starting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at 30 Key Drive, our new little cabinet shop warehouse. And we expect that that'll go through Tuesday, April 16th, whenever we conclude the AIP equipment over there. And then we'll begin our election day equipment at our office, 995 Roswell Street, on the 17th at 9 a.m. And then on the 10th, we will start at 9 a.m. at our office with our ICCs. That's our absentee by mail scanners. So our high-speed scanners that will test our absentee by mail test deck there. So they'll be getting it, we'll be starting there at 9 a.m. I'll be there for the first hour on all of those days. So again, I encourage anyone who has questions or concerns to come and speak with me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has. Thanks, CP. Next, I just wanted to give a brief update on where we're at. We're hiring currently several open positions. So we're in the process of interview and the beginning stages of interviews for most, for our absentee division manager, our registration division manager, our departmental communication specialist, and the GIS analyst. All of those were in the phone screen stage, that first initial stage. Site survey, we're scheduling our in-person interviews for that for next week. And then we're also conducting in-person interviews for our absentee by mail assistant supervisor. So lots going on. So Carly's been very busy helping me get all those scheduled, and been a huge team lift from all the departments to try to get those positions filled as quickly as possible. Since we're limited in terms of what days they can start, we're trying to speed up the process as much as we can.
Okay. Do you prefer that we hold until the end, or
Whatever
can we
y'all
ask
want.
questions now?
It might be better just to jump in.
I was thinking so. So with regard to the absentee ABM assistant supervisor, you said that you are presently scheduling interviews?
I know that he's done, I believe, the phone screens.
Okay.
And I think he's doing the next stage, working on scheduling those next.
Okay. And the same for the GIS analyst?
Yes, I believe Kevin and Melissa are scheduling those. The registration supervisors handle those directly, since that's their direct report.
Okay. And then with respect to the division managers for absentee and for registration, remind me, I'm sorry, I just wanted to be clear. You're currently, or the office is currently doing phone screens at this time?
We are scheduling them. So we just got the referrals back. I was out several days last week for a conference, so I got those referrals back, I believe, right when I got back. And so I spent several days going through those applications that were referred, and then I gave Carly a list, I think, at the end of last week to start scheduling phone screens for those individuals.
Okay. All right. So on the first two, phone screens have been conducted, and they're moving on to the second
I
phase for
believe so,
scheduling
yes.
interviews. With regard to these two, you're at the phone screen. And then with respect to the communication specialist?
Also at the phone screen.
At the phone
Yep.
screen. Okay. I just wanted to draw that line of demarcation as far as the status of where you were in the process for the first two versus the balance of
Yeah,
them.
and I do expect it'll go pretty quickly, especially for the division managers. There weren't a ton of referrals, so they really narrowed down the pool due to the level of experience that was required. So I don't think it'll take very long once we begin the interview process.
And to that very point, I mean, do you believe that we have a sufficient number of qualified applicants?
I think between both of those we do. I think once I talk to them, we have several in-house applicants as well as external. So I think maybe once I see a little like activity that they'll do to kind of see how they prioritize different tasks in a short amount of time. It's not a test, but it's just a way to see kind of how they gauge their priorities, mixed with an in-person or a Zoom interview. I think that we'll be able to fill both positions.
Okay, but just based upon prior experience that you believe to be necessary to be successful in either of those roles, given the fact that they're division managers?
Absolutely, tons of experience on the
got it.
applications.
Ms. Fisher, it looked like you had a question.
I did have a question. So people who will be reporting to these positions are doing the initial interview? Did I hear that correctly?
In some instances, yes.
And do we have a third person outside of that purview doing
Yes,
those with
I
them?
just not that I'm not always in those interviews. So I
Okay.
tend to leave the hiring of our regular level positions up to those supervisors and division managers. So we always encourage to make sure we have a diverse interview panel in all interviews that we give, to make sure that we're showing diversity across the different departments as well as different levels of management within our departments. And so they put those together, like, for example, for the site survey position, I'll be sitting in on those, but for the GIS analyst, I wouldn't necessarily be sitting in on that because it's very technical, and I leave that to the technical people.
Yeah, probably a good idea. What about the absentee ballot manager, though? Who actually?
The assistant supervisor or the
Uh-huh.
division manager?
The what?
The assistant supervisor or the division manager?
Division
I'll be doing the division managers along with I'll probably pull in other department managers, so
Okay.
outside of elections, to get some perspective there, and then people within the department as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments or more questions with regard to the HR personnel update? Okay, go ahead.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So next is redistricting. So I'm happy to report that any confusion about who your commissioner is should no longer be a question because everyone's MVP has been updated. So everyone was able to get through, and the registration team get through those updates by the April 1st deadline that we had set. So everyone's MVP is updated to reflect their current commissioner who will be on their ballot for this upcoming election if you are in 2 and 4. And then we heard from the Secretary of State's office this morning that they'll be updating the MVP with the sample ballots, either the end of this week or Monday. So if you haven't used the sample ballot tool on MVP, it's a really cool interactive tool. It's not just a PDF. It's an interactive tool that allows you to actually go in and explore your specific sample ballot based on your districts. We also utilized the Secretary of State's tool, quality assurance tool that they had given us for redistricting. The last time it was pulled was on Friday, and I sent the board my weekly report on Friday with that information. We were down to just 598 addresses needing double check. So we were at 0%, which when we started, it was lit up like a Christmas tree, the map was, and now we're down to just a few little specks on there. And the team did go through and make all 598 changes on Friday. The report hasn't been pulled today. Normally they do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but it wasn't pulled as of 2 o'clock today. So I expected that number to be near 0, if not 0. So the main issues that we've seen are around the county borders to just double check that we're not pulling voters from another county into Cobb or vice versa. So we've been working with the metro counties, meeting, we just met this morning actually, to make sure that we're all in communication with each other. That way if we have a question about a specific voter or an address, they know exactly who to reach out to. For example, not me, because I'm not the one doing the redistricting, it'd be Kevin or Melissa, my registration supervisors. So that is in effect, and we hope to have the border addresses for all metro counties complete by next Monday is our goal that we've set.
On the redistricting, when do you think the new voter cards will be available?
And if I can add an amendment to that, because I had a question as well, do we anticipate the Secretary of State sending out any cards? Because I know there was a lot of confusion. With regard to cards that they sent out, then obviously we subsequently sent out cards. So if you could just also address that as well.
Sure. So I have not been informed of another round of cards being sent to us by the Secretary of State that then we are supposed to send out. If I start to see those come in, we'll be sure to check them before we send any out. In the event, I'm not aware, like I said, of them sending out cards. So I do plan to have us send out our own cards as soon as I see that ESRI number a little bit closer to 0, because I don't want those 598 voters to get incorrect information. We'll design our own cards with our vendor that we used for the yellow cards that were sent out for the last election. They're very responsive, very quick, and effective vendor that we used for that. So we'll do that just so that way I can be sure and I can sleep at night that the data is correct because I'm the one who pulled it. That's the biggest, I think, difference there. So that is the plan for the cards to get that done as soon as I said, I think by the end of the week when we can get that ESRI number lower.
So will those be sent to all Cobb voters?
Yes. All active and inactive registered voters will receive those cards.
Follow-up question on that. If we send out your cards that you guys pull and it's done, check. If the Secretary of State then sends you another round of cards, do we have the option not to send a second round to eliminate any confusion?
I would have to check with the Secretary of State's office on the legality and the
Because
requirements.
you guys would already have to go to the trouble of checking, since we know there have been accuracy issues with them in the past. And if you've already sent out cards that you know are accurate, it just seems like less of a risk to not send out that second round from the Secretary of State.
Yeah, I can check in with the Secretary of State's office and let them know that that is our plan to do that and see if they could save some of their money by not cutting those cards and sending them over to us. And then if they are required to, then what our options are to opt out and use our own cards instead. So I'll check with them and get an answer.
Okay. And I know we drew a distinction between their cards and our cards earlier in the year based upon the color, is there, and I hate to be in the kind of in the details and the minutia here, but is there a plan to use a specific color? Does it continue to be yellow?
Yes, we'll continue to use the yellow postcard. I think
Okay.
it just stands out a little bit more in the stack of mail.
Okay.
Postcards are postcards, but I think yellow is what we'll stick with.
All right, and I only raise that as to the concern, and I personally don't rely upon the cards, but I know I'm likely in the minority there, to the extent that someone received a yellow card in March, and then they receive another yellow card in April, and the information is conflicting. Perhaps you look to a different color card in April, once you get the validation or the team has validated that the information is correct, such that there cannot, or hopefully nothing is fail-safe, but that to reduce the opportunity of confusion between the card that they received in March and the card that they're receiving in April in advance of the May election.
Our yellow cards that we sent out in March did not contain any district information. It was
Okay.
only polling place
Polling
changes,
place
and
changes,
that
okay.
information hasn't changed.
Okay.
So I think we'll be okay with this round. So we'll add the box with each voter's district information, as well as another iteration of their polling location for all voters, not just the ones who changed.
Okay, we know that there are a lot of voters that came to us and said, hey, I got a yellow card from you all, and then I got a card 2 days later that was white from the Secretary of State, which is which, and so.
Right,
okay.
definitely, I agree.
Well, and on that note, perhaps looking at adding somewhere on the card a printed on date or a.
Absolutely, we will be
because
doing
that
that,
way, at
yeah.
least from the call center perspective, they can ensure, hey, are you looking at a card that says printed on and printed by Cobb County on this date? You know,
Absolutely.
that way, it gives us that ability to talk even amongst ourselves if somebody reaches out to us.
Right, because I think our cards have our the Cobb County seal on it, correct?
The
Whereas
board seal.
The board seal, okay. Got it. Ms.
So
Fisher, you had a question?
I'm still waiting on white and yellow cards. I've never received a new card, but I didn't have a precinct change. I believe there was 1 or 2 people who had reported to the Republican Party that their commission district was incorrect.
On the white card.
On the yellow card.
There were no
that they
commission
did.
districts on yellow cards. It
Then
was only people's polling
Then it would have
places.
been white. So what did we do to make sure? Because God bless all of you for dealing with this and getting all of the data in. It's been confusing for everyone. What do we do to make sure that there aren't other cards out there? I was told that you were aware of this. Okay. So what are we doing to just make sure that, two questions in one. What are we doing to make sure that what we're sending out is correct? Maybe in addition to put sent on, we put subject to change, because it is subject to change. And we don't know how, but I'm kidding about that, or maybe I'm not. But there's a lot of confusion out there.
Yeah, I think that was the core of it, is that we found out that the cards that were sent to us to send out by the Secretary of State, that data was pulled the beginning of January, is my understanding, before we had voted on the polling place changes, that big package we did at the January meeting, that this data was pulled before that. So that's why all of the polling place changes were not incorporated in those postcards. So you wouldn't have received a yellow postcard because you didn't have a polling place change.
Right.
And those yellow postcards only contained polling place change information. It did not have anyone's districts for anything listed on there. Not House, state level, federal level, nothing was included. It was just a polling place.
I'll verify whether the cards that were wrong, because they did have districts on it, so I'm guessing that
They would
came
have been the
from
white
the
cards.
Secretary of State.
And so now that, since that data was pulled in January, now that we've completed the redistricting process, like I said, once I get this quality assurance number a little bit closer to 0, we'll know that the data we're pulling from Jarvis is correct.
Okay.
And since we have this report through the quality assurance tool of if there is maybe 20 to 50 that are left that are along our borders, we can be sure to pull those cards and do those separately to ensure that they are correct.
Okay, and my final question is on redistricting. Don't know what happened to the home rule maps that were on our website. It used to list the home rule first, the constitutionally correct one second, and now the home rule has kind of disappeared. It's nowhere on our election site, only the state maps. So,
I was not aware of the home rule maps being on the website because we don't have a GIS analyst at this time to draw those maps, but I worked with the person in our office who works on the website to update that section, because I do understand that it could be confusing to voters who are voting in this upcoming election. So now it links to the county's GIS tool that does have the home rule maps, and then it has the school board map, because that was updated and it was listed correctly on there. So
where?
In that
home
same
rule?
table, the school board map.
Oh, the school board map.
Right,
Well,
so we
the home
removed-
rule map is, at least if it is, it's hidden.
I believe it was added this afternoon after I worked with the website individual.
Okay.
But it
because-
sounds like it's a link to another map. It doesn't,
Is
correct?
it the precinct map or strictly the boundary map?
It's the boundaries. You can zoom in and out. It's not, we don't have a precinct level commission map.
With all the confusion, can we possibly get one with precincts? Because
I can work with the county's GIS team to see if they'd be able to support us in creating that. Since I don't have a GIS analyst at this time, it's not something we can support in our office, but I can definitely ask the county's GIS team for their support in creating that map.
I know it's going to be extra work for you. I just think that with all this confusion, the precincts need to be on the maps.
Debbie, obviously that would be ideal. And I'm just saying it because there's resource constraints. We could always point the voters to looking themselves up on MVP. If they need to see on MVP, they can look themselves up in addition to just seeing the boundaries in the map that's posted.
We could do that,
I mean,
guess, but
because it sounds like we have resource constraints with who's available to make those changes.
I just don't think there's anyone in that role. That's one of the roles that you're currently scheduling interviews for.
Correct.
So, but we do appreciate the support. I want to make certain we publicly acknowledge our colleagues with the county. We do appreciate the support that they have provided thus far. The GIS team there, and if there is an opportunity for them to assist us, I know that you'll explore that.
Definitely.
Okay. Was there anything further for Director Fall with respect to redistricting before we move on to the other items? You do have additional items in your update?
Yes.
Okay, go right ahead.
I think we're halfway through, so we're getting there, maybe a little bit more. So looking at May, this one will be nice and easy. I did include this in the weekly update last week, but I wanted to make sure everyone was aware. In May, we will have a 2-card ballot. So if you get your absentee by mail ballot, it will be 2 separate pages. For the Republican and nonpartisan elections, it'll be 2 one-sided pages, so 2 single-sided cards. And then if it's the Democrat ballot, it'll be 1 page that's double-sided, 1 page that's single-sided. That's because the Democratic Party had both county and state level questions, whereas the Republican Party only had state level questions. So that's how the cards were designed. The ballots are designed by the Secretary of State's office. So once we got those final proofs, I believe it was last Tuesday when we signed off on those, that's when we had the final versions and we knew that they would be 2 cards. Again, that's only for voters who are voting absentee by mail. If you vote in person, it'll print all of your selections just on that one individual page. So it will be a 19-inch ballot as well. So 2-card 19-inch ballot. We mailed out our UOCAVA ballots on Saturday, as we're legally required to mail out our uniformed and overseas ballots 45 days prior to Election Day. So we had 106 email ballots. Those are typically delivered via email. That way they can print them off and mail them back right away. But we did have 9 individuals that opted for a physical ballot. So we mailed those 9 physical ballots overseas as well. So that's what we did on Saturday. The team knocked that out, which brings me to USPS. So obviously there have been a lot of concerns brought to us by individuals here in our meetings, by Board of Commissioner members who have brought complaints from their constituents to my attention about the USPS delays. It is my understanding that our Secretary of State, along with other Secretaries of States, have met with federal level USPS employees to discuss this issue through NAS and NASHEAD, which is their national associations. I'm not sure if we'll be getting a report or an update on what's coming of that. So as the Region 3, the metro area election directors, as we're focusing on those border addresses for redistricting is our focus through next Monday. After we complete that process, we're hoping to set a meeting with our local postal master general, or whatever is the appropriate title for our local people here, specifically those working around the Palmetto processing facility, which we believe is the root cause of a lot of our delays. We hope to set a meeting with them. If we don't hear an outcome from the Secretary of State, we figured it'd definitely be best to let him handle it at a higher level, if possible, before we get involved at the more local level. So hope to have maybe more information next week on that. The next thing I wanted to cover is the upcoming state election board meeting. So I did receive written notice this past week that we'll have 3 cases being heard before the state election board next month in May. So I forwarded those to the board and let them know that that was coming up. So the first one is 2024-016, which is the 74 ballots that were incorrectly mailed to voters in the March presidential preference primary, where they were mailed Republican ballots when they should have been mailed Democratic ballots. So that'll be heard, and all 3 of these cases are in which the state election board believes we have violated something, and so that's why we're going forward. They're not, all 3 of these are violations, none of them are non-violations. The second one is 2022-327, which is when we, in 2022, in November, when we removed the scanner cards from the scanners at East Cobb Government Center for AIP. This was because the day before, I believe, we had received guidance from the Secretary of State's office that our vote totals could not go over a certain threshold on the scanners, because once they cross that threshold, it has a hard time keeping all the ballot images, which are what's stored on those scanner media drives. So which memory cards. And so now that especially we have a 19-inch ballot, for absentee, we want to make sure that we're getting clear guidance on that. So I'm looking forward to hopefully get a clear answer, because we've been told we've been found in violation of something that we had written guidance from the Secretary of State's office to do. So I'm not 100% sure what'll be the outcome of that, but I am looking forward to it. And then the third case that'll be heard is SEB 2022-340, which was also in 2022. This was an individual brought in her mother to vote in the elderly and disabled portion of our AIP site at our main office. And there was a lack of privacy, as the voting machine she was voting on was placed near the door. And so I guess people could walk by and see the way in which she was marking her ballot on the screen. We were made aware of this complaint at the time that it was lodged, and so we have changed the way that we set up that room to ensure that doesn't happen again. This is a common concern that we get, because you're voting on what looks like a giant tablet, so it definitely seems like in some of our larger precincts, or when we're using different setups of the equipment, that it lends itself to where you don't have much privacy. In speaking with the prep center manager about this, he let me know that they have looked at privacy screens that would be laid over the tops of all of our ICXs to prevent this from happening. So sometimes you see those on people's phones or laptops. The cost of that would be about just under $86 per screen protector. At just over 2,200 ICXs would place us at just over $190,000 to make that purchase for the concern of privacy. So that's outside of doing the best we can to set up the rooms. I think it's difficult because we have to have a certain number of machines depending on the size of the precinct, but we're only given the room we're given. So we do the best we can to ensure privacy, but it's not always fully possible. So that would be kind of the only solution, I think, to how our equipment is set up as of now. Any questions about the SEB cases? Great. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is the rollover list, which was brought up by Ms. Riddle, and she mentioned that I had spoken earlier with the Ms. Bassinger, who I spoke to on the phone this morning. This was an issue that was brought to our attention by my ABM supervisor. And he let me know that when you sign up for your absentee by mail ballots, if you're considered an elderly over the age of 65 or disabled voter, you can opt in for absentee by mail ballots for that whole calendar year instead of having to apply for every single election. So, for example, if you're a college student that's away, if you're at Auburn, and you want your ballots from Cobb, you'd have to submit 5 applications in order to vote in all 5 elections we have this year. If you're in that elderly and disabled group, you can just apply before the PPP and be clued in for the whole year. Because of the issues with USPS, we saw a higher than normal number of voters who had been issued their absentee ballots go to vote in person, either because they hadn't been received their absentee ballot yet, or they were concerned that it was too close to election day. So they either voted absentee in person or they went and voted on election day if they could. What we discovered when we were assigning those voters credit in Jarvis is that it was undoing their elderly and disabled status that allowed them to be on what we call the rollover list, which, as it sounds, rolls them over from election to election. This is not a Cobb County issue. This is not something that we have done. This is a Jarvis issue, so it is a statewide issue. The other counties have not mentioned this, so I'm not sure if they're unaware or they are aware and they just do this anyways, but this is the first that we as a team, maybe my newness, have been made aware of this concern. Our ABM supervisor was going back and forth with our liaison, our Secretary of State liaison, to try to get an answer of what we should be doing. And then we did receive a response last week in which our liaison did confirm that this is a Jarvis issue. Jarvis is canceling the rollover if they cancel their absentee by mail ballot to vote in person, which they have to sign that canceled ballot affidavit to ensure we don't count their ballot if we were to get it. And that the county needs to decide our process in this circumstance. And that he said, quote, "We always encourage the counties to err on the side of the voter and to speak with their county attorney." So based on that, and then speaking with Ms. Bassinger this morning, she said that she had kind of been run around a little bit between the State Election Board, the Secretary of State's office, when she spoke to our liaison, who finally did direct her to us and said the same thing. So now that we finally have an answer, we feel comfortable moving forward with whatever the board sees as fit, as if we can allow those voters that initial application that was submitted prior to this election or for this election moving forward, to where we could roll over those individuals instead of making them reapply, because that's what Jarvis is saying now, is that they don't have an active application for the future elections.
So how would that be done?
So unfortunately, there isn't a report in Jarvis that we say, tell me who got removed from the rollover list. That's not where it is. So it would be a fairly manual process where I believe kind of the only solution right now would be for us to pull the report of who had their ballots canceled and then manually go through and check who submitted an E&D, an elderly and disabled application before the March presidential preference primary, and ensure that all those voters are indeed on the rollover list. And if they are not, manually reassign them. We'd actually have to resubmit that original application as a new application in order to get them back on the rollover list. But again, after this election, if they choose to vote in person instead, if we still have these same issues, they will again be removed.
Go ahead, Debbie. I'm going to ask a question.
Well, as you're talking through that, it comes to mind the ability in Jarvis to go in and change a canceled ballot to a live ballot. Is that possibly why Jarvis has that bad idea in there, so that if this were the scenario, if I voted in person, my ballot's been canceled, then somebody comes in and makes it live again, does that restore them under the same application to rollover?
No.
Even doing that without a new application?
Correct. They'd have to submit, because when they sign that canceled ballot affidavit, it cancels that application.
Oh.
And so we'd have to put them in as a new application and resubmit this same application, and then we could put them back on the E&D rollover list.
Got it. Thank you.
During Ms. Riddle's comments, she did, and I made a point of of this, taking this comment, that this, she indicated that she'd reached out to other metro counties and that it appeared to be a Cobb County issue. One, thank you for sharing with the board the email correspondence with members of the Secretary of State's team, and in that communication, it has been indicated to us, as our director has shared with us, that this is a Jarvis issue. This is not an issue where Cobb County has determined that if someone comes in and votes in person after submitting that submitting the request to be on that rollover list, they're then removed. That's not the case here, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess, have you had any communication with your counterparts in surrounding counties? Because this is a Jarvis issue, is there perhaps an opportunity to, for you all as a collective, go and have a conversation with the Secretary of State? Because I would tend to think that there is some type of programming within Jarvis that kicks them out. And reading what has been presented, putting this on the counties, and obviously we will do the right thing as required of us by our voters, but kicking this decision back to the counties and their attorneys is potentially going to result in despair. I mean, some counties are going to say yes, have them submit an application. Some counties are going to say no, we're going to rely upon the initial application. And have you had any conversation, whether it be with, I know you're in pretty consistent communication with Zach as he leads the Gabrielle Region 3, but any others?
We have not discussed this particular Jarvis ABM issue. There have been others that I've noticed that we tend to find first because Dominique is so diligent in the work that he does. Like, for example, the provisional issue where Jarvis was no longer allowing us to issue provisional absentee by mail ballots as required under law, that if someone has something missing from their application, if it fits within a certain category, they're still issued an the absentee by mail ballot is just a provisional ballot, and Jarvis wasn't allowing us to do that. And when that was brought to the state, their response was that that would be fixed in the patch coming before the May election. So we needed to figure out a workaround for the March election. And when I brought that to our Region 3 meeting, no one else had gotten to that stage yet because we were a little ahead of the game on going ahead and stacking up who's gonna be our provisional voters instead of waiting till possibly later on in the cycle. So I'll definitely bring this up at our next meeting that we have, and I can reach out to Zach and Kelvin directly to see if they're aware of this.
Sure.
I know based on the language in the email that Dominique was having with the Secretary of State that dates back to mid-March on this issue, based on the back and forth and the lack of response for a while, I do believe that this is maybe a newly identified issue because there was not an immediate response that was very straightforward. It was more of a let me talk to so-and-so and I'll get back with you. And then after Dominique's diligence to follow up several times is when we did receive an answer on how to handle the situation.
Okay. Okay. Well, I will say it would appear to be, since they, in this email communication, they've put it back on the board in consultation with our council. Mr. White, do you have any input you'd like to provide to us here?
Sure. You know, I looked at the statute and I looked at the Secretary of State's regulations. There's, you know, it's not the provision that allows people to apply for a rollover. It's not the most clearly worded, but if you read it, it certainly, you know, it reads to say elderly and disabled voters, and then any UOCAVA voters can select on the application that they want to receive ballots automatically for every election in that cycle, but it doesn't, there's no language there or in the regs that say, you know, if you choose not to vote that way, you can't get it for the next one. So I think the strongest legal position is to allow them to continue to vote. I know that's more work for staff and just involves kind of matching up lists of voters that aren't automatically built into the system, but I don't see, I think that's the safer way to err on the side of, you know, allowing people who've requested it to vote when it doesn't. There's nothing in the statute that says if you choose to, you know, vote. And in fact, you know, strangely, like advanced in-person voting is still in statute, still a form of absentee voting. So it's like you could come in and vote another way absentee and still somehow be, you know, have your ballot canceled. So I think probably the better position to take is to try to go ahead and have that list available and double check it and send people ballots if they've had to come in and cancel their ballots. And it may be something where you put in a process, at least for the rest of this cycle, until the Secretary of State addresses it, and just have something where you can notate on when they come in to cancel. Are they someone who's requested ballots for future, for rollover?
Debbie?
I'm sitting here thinking through that, and I think it's going to be problematic using the same application. My guess is because, and correct me if I'm wrong, so playing out the scenario that happened, if we go in there and reuse the original application and it shows that I voted in person, and my absentee ballot is the same ballot ID, which I think it would be linked to that application. Is that correct? So it could look like I voted twice.
It wouldn't, because it's under a different election. So we have
okay.
to open this election as being ballot ready, and not until then can we issue ballots. So
Okay.
any ballot that would be issued that would then come back would show as the May 21st, and it would
Okay.
not be tied to the March 12th.
Okay.
Question, is this a new problem or a newly discovered problem?
That's a great question that I'm not sure. This is the first that I've heard of it, so I don't believe it was apparent, at least in last November before I got here. But I believe that this is the first that it's been raised to the Secretary of State from Cobb, that this is a concern that we have. I don't know if it's just because of the volume that we're doing with the kind of perfect storm of the issues with USPS is why it's been, because typically people who do elect on the E&D rollover list, they do solely vote absentee by mail.
So it's more likely that the issue with Jarvis has been around, but it hasn't been picked up because there have been so few people who request the absentee ballot and then go vote in person. But the USPS delays are now causing people to do that at a higher rate.
I don't want to assume, but I would think that that is probably likely.
We've only used it for one.
I was just gonna say,
we've only
Jarvis was
used it for one election. That
In
was the
November.
municipal
So we
elections.
might not have even picked it up.
We probably wouldn't have.
Right.
The
because-
low number of ballots.
And then there wasn't a runoff. so-
Right.
And
There
there-
wasn't a need for a rollover beyond the November election of last
It would
year.
only be, I guess,
So-
if someone applied for the specials, and then the special that we had earlier in '23, and then there was, I believe, a runoff for that special, I believe.
I don't know
No.
that Jarvis wasn't used
No.
for the specials.
The
Jarvis was
municipal-
used for the first time, as I understand it, for the November election.
That's
I
correct.
want to point out that the statute that allows E&D rollover says that it doesn't apply to special elections. So for a special, you'd have to have a separate, so even if it was special, there has to be a separate ballot, absentee ballot. This is only for years that involve a cycle, so a primary and a general and any runoffs. You can say, for this cycle, I want to do E&D rollover, and so that doesn't apply to special elections, and that to be separate. So yes, this is probably likely the first time this has even come up, because the municipal.
First opportunity for it to come.
Yeah, I don't think we would have had that issue exposed in the municipal.
I agree. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to share with us, either Mr. White or Director Fall, as it relates to this issue?
That was the last on my list.
Okay.
I guess I was going to speak about General Jarvis issues as well, once
Okay.
we're done with that.
Sure. I just wanted to note, based upon the guidance that, Ms. Fisher had raised a question about being able to, quote, take action, notwithstanding the fact that we're in this update. She'll finish her update, but it would appear, based upon the guidance that Mr. White has given us, that we need to amend the agenda to allow for a vote as to how we would move forward to allow our office to manage through this. So just kind of taking a mental note, maybe somebody else keep me honest so that I don't overlook that. But do you want to give the director the opportunity to conclude her report?
Thank you. So the last thing I want to talk about in general was just our overarching Jarvis issues. So I know that before I started in this job, there was a letter that was sent on behalf of Region 3 to the Secretary of State with some broad stroke issues that I'm not really sure have been resolved. In our communications with myself and the board and our council, talking about just those issues being kind of pervasive, and the question was raised if we could pull a report on all the reef tickets that we've submitted. So the reef tickets, I'm sure it stands for something really official, but it's just the tickets, the IT help desk tickets that we put in when we have an issue with Jarvis. And it would be great if we could pull a report. However, the reef tickets are not submitted through Jarvis. They're submitted through Firefly, which is our platform that we use for official communications from the Secretary of State's office, training materials, past webinars. It's kind of that LMS system that we use there. And I even noticed when I was looking at it today that it actually in the website code, it still says ENET, not Jarvis, because this is the same form they used for ENET. So even prior, our former system, ENET, did not have a ticket system where you could submit directly through. They just created the reef ticket system to answer the idea of people being able to submit a ticket. So it's not connected to Jarvis in that way. And I think part of it is because, in speaking with my staff today, part of it is because Jarvis is still in that stage where when an issue comes in, they decide, is this a development issue that needs to go back to Salesforce, who's the parent company, or is this a coding issue that we're responsible for, we being the Secretary of State's office? So I think because they're still in that newness, a lot of the tickets are being decided as, I guess, who gets billed, right? Where does that ticket go? Which team is it going to? And so I think that's part of it. I know that the registration team has kept a log in the past of those reef tickets that they submitted to make sure that they could track if a reef was ever resolved or not, because there is no resolution. There, you get an automatic email confirmation that it was submitted, and then beyond that, it's normally just you'll get a Firefly or Buzz post update saying there was a mass update if it was a widespread issue. But for the one-off issues, we've kind of resorted to submitting a reef ticket and then immediately sending an email and following up on that email thread. And my staff knows that if you have to send 2 updates or 2 requests for information, CC me on it, and then I follow up, and hopefully that helps push it up a little bit more. So we will look at creating a database where when my staff submits a reef ticket, they'll simultaneously be submitting it into our own internal database, and that'll be helpful for me too to know I can get ahead of those follow-ups. And since we have biweekly meetings with Blake with the Secretary of State's office, I'll be able to know what's still outstanding prior to those meetings. So I think it will be helpful for us to begin to track across all departments, not just in registration, because we see the majority of the tickets come from registration and then absentee.
Well, thank you for being proactive and putting that database into place. It's unfortunate that there's no readily available reporting capability that the Secretary of State would be able to provide, kind of just a real-time update as to the status of those tickets. My request of you would be, once your team puts that database in place, if you could incorporate maybe not the detail, but just high-level updates into your weekly update to the board, providing us with a status, that would be wonderful. I don't know, does anyone have any other comments? Yes.
I
go ahead,
do.
Mr. Bush.
One thing I would highly encourage you if they're filing it and they're already on Firefly, is go ahead and put out a question to the masses. Have you experienced this problem? Because my guess is a lot of these smaller counties may not come across it, but the problem exists. And I have a feeling that the Secretary of State's office may be prioritizing these issues by how many have reported the issue. The problem is nobody knows how many have reported the issue. So us being able to see any further conversation on this kind of one-off problem, well, it's really not a one-off problem, it's just another problem, would be, I think it would be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, it'll demonstrate how pervasive the issue is, and to the extent that someone hasn't come across it.
A little fire under the,
I agree.
yeah. So I would just recommend you consider that.
Is there anything else generally for, okay. Yes, Mr. Bruning, go.
Are we going to have motion on the policy regarding rollover.
Yes, we will. I just want to give her an opportunity to finish her update per Mr. White's guidance. We need to allow that update to conclude, then we'll amend or entertain a motion to amend the agenda to add that action item. Suspend the rules, add the action item. That's correct, Mr. Wright? Right?
That's correct. The motion would be to suspend the rules to add an agenda item, and first you'd approve that motion, and then you'd be able to vote on the agenda item.
Okay, absolutely. So I will entertain, so if there's nothing further for Director Fall, thank you for your very comprehensive update. And I know I can say this on behalf of the entire board. We do appreciate the weekly updates, written reports that you provide to us. I personally don't read them until Monday. I do appreciate the fact that you send them on Friday and you make sure that they are sent on Friday prior to you beginning your weekend, but I do appreciate that, and I know everybody else does as well. Okay. I will entertain a motion to suspend the rules to amend the agenda to add an item for action by the board.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to suspend the meeting rules to amend the agenda so that the board can take action on a matter. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. Next, I will entertain a motion to approve the office's use of a single application submitted by those voters that are eligible to remain on the E&D rollover list, such that if they come in to vote after receiving an absentee ballot, they are not required to submit a subsequent application.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded to approve the motion as presented. All those in favor? The motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the board chair update. I just want to address one item, and I will most likely be deferring mostly to our council as it relates to the state election board meeting that took place, wherein there were 2 or 3 complaints that were submitted to the state election board in connection with the qualifying process for that concluded on April the 8th. My understanding are the individuals that submitted those complaints, copies of which we were not formally provided, would be Commissioner Kelly Gambrill, Mr. Donald Barth, yes, Donald Barth, as well as a complaint was submitted on behalf of the Cobb County GOP. And so myself and Director Fall accompanied our counsel, Attorney White, to attend this meeting, and I know that a number of our board members were able to view that meeting during its, as it took place with respect to the complaints as submitted. Mr. White, if you want to go ahead and just give kind of a thumbnail update, version update of what transpired and what, even more importantly, what has not transpired since that meeting.
Sure. Just by way of a quick timeline, we received notice early in the week before the meeting was to occur. I believe it was on like a Monday, that the state election board was going to call a meeting, and that it might involve Cobb County, complaints about Cobb County. But when the notice was issued, it didn't mention Cobb County, and it didn't to say anything other than a discussion of qualification issues for party candidates, I think. And so neither the notice nor the agenda provided any indication of specific complaints. And the only reason the board even became aware of one of the complaints was that the Merida Journal reporter called us and asked us, had we seen Commissioner Gambrell's complaint? And so I didn't see that one, although the agenda didn't tell us that's what was going to be discussed. So for all I knew, they were going to talk about something else. Never, before the meeting, received a copy of the Cobb Republican Party complaint, but Ms. Grubbs was kind enough to give me a copy after the meeting, and I still have yet to this date to see Mr. Barth's complaint. And that, neither the complainants nor the board provided those to us, and so that's just sort of the lead into the meeting. So when we attended the state election board.
And I apologize for interrupting you, Mr. White. My understanding is the complaint as it was submitted by Commissioner Gambrell, I believe we received that from a reporter with the MDJ, am I correct?
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's how, the one from Commissioner Gambrell came through the report of the MDJ. And so, but again, we didn't know whether that was going to be discussed or not because the agenda didn't tell us. All that to say, I did contact the state election board in writing to ask them for copies of all the complaints. I received a phone call from the chair who told me they would like us to participate and that he was going to call us. He was intending to call our chair and ask us to invite us to participate. I don't believe he ever did call, but that we were welcome to attend. When we attended the meeting, they allowed each side 20 minutes to sort of make a presentation. And then the state election board asked questions, and so they allowed the three complainants to sort of make their allegations and say what, I guess, restate what was in their complaints that we had not seen at that point. And then after the questions, they permitted us to speak. But I basically told the state election board that I didn't think the hearing was appropriate, that they hadn't followed the bare minimum for due process. Of giving our board or our staff notice of what was going to be discussed at the meeting. And so to the extent the board wanted a legal update, we were willing to give that, but I was not going to advise my clients to testify at a hearing on which they had no notice of what was being discussed. It was sort of like being asked to come to, answer questions, but they're not going to tell you what you have to answer questions about. And, as an attorney, that's not... it's really not following the basic rules of due process. So I did give the board a legal update about the status, specifically about the status of the county commission redistricting process and how the Floam lawsuit affected that, and the fact that there was a statement issued by this board March 1st, right before qualifying, about which maps should be used. There was clearly some confusion among the parties, but particularly the Cobb Republican Party qualified candidates from both maps instead of choosing one, even if they disagreed with our position. And I updated them on that and noted that, the position that this board took was not anything that had to be voted on, that there's never a vote taken on which maps to apply. That's not how this works. State election board doesn't take votes on which map to apply. You just, this board applies the map as the law says it is. And our understanding of the law right now is that the home rule map is currently in place only because there's an appeal that was filed by the Cobb Commission of Judge Harris's order. And so once that happened, and because there was no injunction that had been filed by the plaintiffs, by the Floams, and no injunction had been granted along with the declaratory judgment, there was no, the automatic supersedious in Georgia appellate code applied, and it said that Judge Harris's order was stayed. If there had been an injunction filed or requested by the plaintiffs and granted, then it would have been up to Cobb County to have that injunction lifted, but for whatever reason, the plaintiffs made their choice on how they wanted to litigate and didn't include it. So that meant the automatic supersedious went into place. We were very hopeful that the Supreme Court would issue a ruling before and did order expedited briefing, but the court did not rule on the supersedious issue. We filed an entire amicus brief trying to draw it to the court's attention, and they didn't rule on it, and in fact continued to hold it in abeyance. And then I believe the Cobb GOP tried to intervene in the Floam case and asked the court to rule that the home rule map should not be used and that the legislative map should be used. But Judge Harris actually ended up confirming our position, which is that she said she could not allow the intervention and could not take any enforcement actions because the supersedious is in place. So that That was the update that I gave the board. They asked some questions following up after that. And I also let them know that there is a candidate challenge that had been, upheld by our board, but was being appealed, and that the hearing on that is Monday. I want to let everybody know it has been moved from 10 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. The court issued an order denying the motion for TRO in one of the two cases, but in that order mentioned that the hearing has been moved from 10 a.m. on April 11th to March, or to 9:30 on April 11th. And so that's sort of where things stand. And then since after our update, there were no actions taken at the meeting, and the comments that we heard afterwards that they don't have any plan to take any action at this time. So, I suppose there could be some action taken at a future date based on some investigation that we may or may not know about. But there's not any action taken by the board at that meeting, and there hasn't been any since then that I'm aware of.
Great. And there's not been any further communication from the state election board following the conclusion of that meeting. And again, at that meeting, they indicated that they were not intending to take it. They were not intending to take any action.
That was the last statement you made, was that they didn't intend to take any action at this point.
Okay. Again, I had the benefit of being there together with Director Fall, but I wanted to obviously give the opportunity for the balance of the board to ask any questions that they may have, and obviously had intended to ask, excuse me, for the update with regard to pending litigation, that being the hearing that will take place on April the 11th in the appeal of this board's disqualification of Ms. Adams from the ballot.
And I also should have mentioned that there's still a hearing set for the Floam appeal, April 17th, down at the Georgia Supreme Court.
So there's oral argument.
I'll be there, but we're not a party, so at this point anyways, I'm not required to, I'll just be there to observe, see if I can read some tea leaves. But
yeah.
If for some reason there was a decision issued in this and they could somehow get it consolidated, I might be required to participate, but not at this point. We're just observing.
Okay. And I know I've spoken with Director Fall. She and I both will be attending, and I believe Mr. Bruning will be attending the hearing that is this Thursday. Will you be attending as well? I figured that you would be.
Aren't we required through the summons?
Well, so yes, I mean, it would be advisable, but you can appear through counsel in this case. So I don't anticipate there being any fact finding here. And to the extent that there's in an appeal like this, it's confined to the record. So it's legal argument, and you are permitted as a board, as a government official to appear through counsel. I think you should attend, but you're not required to, and you don't need to feel bad if you have some pre-existing conflict where you can't come.
Wouldn't miss it for the world.
It's just like any other, if somebody sues the Cobb County Commission over a zoning issue, the commissioners don't all show up to the meeting. It's just, for informational purposes for you. But yes, this, in an appeal like this, it is confined to the record from.
Okay.
So Daniel, just to make it clear for everybody who's listening to this conversation, since the ballots already started to go out on April 6th, would the result of this appeal change anything for the primary, or what would be the outcome?
Well, that's a factor that the court would consider about whether it could be changed at this point, or any kind of remedy, either whether it's in the context of this candidate challenge from by Ms. Seeger against Ms. Adams, or in the Floam case, that the argument has to be, or at least the fact has to be pointed out at the court that the election has already begun for some subset of voters, however small that is, on ballots that included the home rule map. So there's certainly a mootness argument to make there, like at least in terms of affecting this election, you can't do it. But if the court ends up addressing the constitutionality issue, either in the challenge hearing or in the appellate hearing, then it would be up to this. It would have to come back to the Superior Court to sort of address what the remedy would be for that. And I'm not going to speculate either what the plaintiffs would ask for or what the court would grant.
So that sounds as if it's a wait and see, as we've done a lot of waiting and seeing, and so we will continue to wait and see. Yes, Ms. Fisher?
I do have comments on the SCB meeting. It was my understanding, we were told originally it was a discussion, not a hearing. Is that not the case? Did I misinterpret that?
Well, I mean, that's what the agenda said, but when the meeting opened and he cited the section, he held up his little green book and opened it to the section that said that they're allowed to investigate and have hearings about complaints. And so he cited their investigatory hearing provision. So whatever they called it on the agenda, they cited the statute for the other power.
I thought he had a conversation with you. I'll give him a little grace. He's brandy new.
Right, and I also believe it was conducted similar to the manner in which a hearing would be conducted, in as much that each side was provided an opportunity to present its case in chief, if you will. So notwithstanding the nomenclature used, it was conducted as if it were, in my opinion, as if it were a hearing.
Well, for those listening, should they move forward with it and decide it's worthy of an investigation, because it was more discovery, right? Then that's a whole new ballgame.
Continuing to wait and see.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would argue.
And that's not something we get to give input on unless the investigator chooses to talk with us, which is rare. So.
I don't know that it would be so rare in this particular instance. I think everything that has taken place thus far that has resulted in an SEB investigation has been operational in nature, such that we would not have been the individuals that would have the information that would be responsive to an investigator's questions. But I would tend to think that given it's the action or the conduct of this board, as it's been repetitively shared with us, that I would imagine that we would be the individuals that they would come to for information. For example, Ms. Fall, neither any of the staff in our office would be able to provide that factual information to them. But again, we're waiting and seeing.
Well, again, this has never happened before. You mentioned the maps. Well, we have never had this challenge before because the maps have always been done by the legislature or the cities. This has never occurred. So we're on virgin territory throughout this whole process.
Yeah,
so.
no, I actually agreed with you. That's why I said they would come back and speak to us.
You may agree, but I want everybody listening, if anyone is, that to know that this is unknown territory. No one has the answers. So,
Mr. Bruning, yes.
Just one clarification. This board have had to deal with map challenges as long as the board's been in existence, 36 years or whatever it is. The difference is those have always been resolved by the courts before we ran slap up against an election. That's what's different about this situation is, we were open to whatever ruling the Supreme Court was going to hand down. I mean, we had two tools for the county commission, one for the state maps and one for the home rule maps. We didn't know up until 2 days before qualifying started which was going to happen. Supreme Court decided, well, they don't really want to rule and give us a straight answer. And so, we listened to our counsel on what the legal position should be, or the legal precedents, and we followed that. And that there is no conspiracy, no problem. And again, this whole problem is really because of the slowness of the judiciary from making a decision. And so I understand everybody being upset and concerned about one thing or another, but And we've dealt with this for these kind of issues for many, many years. We just never have been unable to get a decision from the courts. So that's how we're stuck.
I don't believe the board has ever had to choose which map. I can't think of any scenario that they had to say, oh, we'll use this map.
Mr. White, if you could address that, please.
Yeah, I know this board never chose to take a map. The board asked me which map applied, and I told you this is what the status of the law is. I mean, that's somebody's got to make that go. So the reality is, when there's a legal dispute, they go to court. I mean, it's Marbury versus Madison, and you go and you say, it's emphatically the place of the courts to decide, to say what the law is. And so right now, we've had one ruling from Judge Harris saying it's unconstitutional. We then had an appeal of that then automatically kicks into a statute that's not been overturned that says there's automatic supersedious that applies to hold it in place. And I briefed the issue over 18 pages to the court to try to get the Supreme Court to rule on it, and the Supreme Court chose not to rule to lift the supersedious or to say whether it applies, and instead asked the Flomes Council to come to court prepared to answer questions about whether their client has standing to even sue, which sort of then, in a follow-up order by Judge Harris, she said, I can't allow the Cobb GOP to intervene because there's a supersedious in place. So right now we have two courts that have said the supersedious is applying. And so that's the law. That's not the board choosing what map to use. That's the law as we understand it through the courts, and that there's no vote to take. That's not a thing.
But neither court said which map was stayed.
It would have been nice to have it in a telegraph, but they don't do that.
Neither court said which map was, including Judge Harris, unless I missed something.
Well, Mr. White, I don't know that it was a map that was stayed. It was Judge Harris's decision that was stayed. Am I correct? By virtue of the appeal. So it wasn't a map that was stayed. I believe it was a decision.
A decision, which was for the constitutionally correct map.
Right.
And we also, just so full disclosure, we had an opinion from the Secretary of State and the Attorney General that the home rule map was not constitutional.
Well,
so, right or no?
Yeah, and that's correct. And again, so again, it goes back to what I was saying before, which is it's the place of the courts to say when there's just a dispute between two power-wielding political bodies. The courts say what the law is. We have to rely on them. But also, it's a good reminder here, and I said that at the SEB meeting, we get a lot of people coming up and getting angry and saying, you're trampling on my constitutional rights, and it's very frustrating that it's taken this long, but let's be real about it. This is a political dispute between a local government and a state government that are run by two different parties. And the people that are upset about which map applies are the people who are either really interested in local government, like me, and whether this is a great this is a law school exam question for me. I'm very interested in this as someone who took local government law in law school and who specializes in it. But the people that are actually really, really invested in it are the people who have a strong party allegiance because they would like to see their map apply. But that happens in every redistricting cycle. Every time there's a redistricting cycle, people are upset that I'd rather vote in this district than the other. And so I think it's a good reminder for the public and for anybody that it's a constitutional issue, but it's a constitutional argument about a subset of powers and who gets to do what under the Georgia Constitution that's been amended roughly 16 times since 1948. So it's important and it's going to get settled, but it's not like somebody saying you can't vote or you can't run. It's just you can't vote or run in your preferred district based on the current status of the court ruling. And people just need to remember that. Nobody's out here to, trample on anybody's rights. This is who has the right to draw the maps. Can the Cobb County Commission draw their own maps? And it's not even that big of a... The only counties that would really, people say, well, 159 counties could start drawing their own maps. Well, 159 counties don't need to worry about it because the legislature's going to pass their map. So there's a very small subset of counties where the legislature's not going to listen when their local leaders bring a map, And that's the subset of counties that's really invested in this. And so let's just keep it in perspective. The court's going to rule on it. If there's a remedy, if it's not constitutional, if it doesn't fall under the home rule powers, so at some point the Supreme Court and our local court's going to have to craft a remedy. But that's what's happening here. It's very frustrating that it has really caused a lot of voter confusion, and this board feels the pressure more than anybody. And so I just, appreciate your patience as we have tried to get a ruling on this issue for the last year and a half, but I promise it's coming. It's just not coming on the schedule that we wanted.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. White. And again, we will continue to wait and see. The next item on the agenda is executive session, if needed. Mr. White, do you believe we need, obviously, we've provided an update as to what's on our docket this week and next week is with regard to litigation.
That's I pretty much had executive session and open session right there.
Indeed. In that respect, however, I do believe it's necessary because it is a matter of public concern, notwithstanding whatever the underpinnings for that concern by the public. Board member comments, it seems like we may have already had those, but does anyone have any board member comments before we adjourn? Okay. That being the case, our next meeting is May the 21st, that being our election night meeting. I will note that we previously had a conversation about having the certification on May the 28th. Was Ms. Brooks? And I saw that in the email correspondence. Pardon?
Oh, I was going to say, that is now posted in our schedule.
Okay, and I just wanted to announce that.
And Jennifer just said it's Memorial Day Monday, which I did not.
That is Memorial Day Monday.
It's the day after.
Oh, so
that's
it's
why
the day.
we're having it on Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Okay.
So our next meetings during the month of May will be May the 21st at 7 p.m. at our office at 995 Roswell Street. That is our election night meeting. And then our certification meeting will take place on May the 28th. And I believe we said that was going to be at 11 a.m.? 11 a.m.? Okay. That meeting will take place at 11 a.m. And again, that's May the 28th at 11 a.m. here to conduct certification of the May 21st election. That being announced, this meeting is adjourned at 5:06 p.m. Thank you.